Welcome to Delia Secondary Lunch and Learn, informal teacher PD every Wednesday at lunch. Today's topic is mind mapping, which of course is a visual representation of a hierarchy of information. It includes a central idea and related ideas branched off the side. This is a very common strategy that has a lot of advantages, such as showing comprehension without a reliance on text. Graphics are easier to understand and retain. It's a quick formative assessment check. It can encourage collaborative learning, and it also connects facts to develop conceptual understandings. Now, you may have stopped listening or tuned out a little bit during this slide, and this is perhaps related to the fact that it's mostly text-based.
This mind map may be a better way to convey information, and I definitely comprehended the ideas better when I was forced to group them into similar subsets.
In order to understand more about memory, we need to look at how the brain processes new information. So incoming information is absorbed into our brain through our 5 senses, and in our sensory memory, this stimuli is either immediately forgotten, or if we choose to pay attention to it, it can be transferred into our short-term memory, more commonly known as our working memory. In order for this new information to be transferred into our long-term memory, though, we need to either elaborate or rehearse this new information. The goal is to get new information stored in long-term memory so that we can later recall this information. Now think of the long-term memory as like a filing cabinet, and in this cabinet there's separate folders that are categorized by different topics. The new information coming in needs to find a folder or a place to go in our long-term memory. Our brain really doesn't like filing loose paper, so it won't file any new information unless we find a neat little folder for it to go in our long-term memory. This means in more traditional rote-style learning, if students are being lectured at and they're not doing a more hands-on activity to elaborate on information, then they're forced to rehearse it at a later date to hopefully store it in long-term memory. And this is where we get into sort of cram sessions for exams and things. But a more effective way for our brain to remember things is to just elaborate on information and guide it into a storage folder within our long-term memory by connecting to our prior knowledge. So large bodies of knowledge or content require an orderly sequence for new information to be processed in this long-term memory. So what does this mean for teaching in our classroom? Well, there's several ways that we can integrate mind maps into our classroom practice to encourage these sorts of memory skills. The first is making character connections for a story. So instead of answering text-based comprehension questions, you can have students draw a mind map of the different characters in the story and their relationship between one another. Use supplementary to other comprehension questions, or this can be used as a student's sole comprehension of a story. Another way we can use mind maps is to contextualize vocabulary. Students are often given a lot of words that they need to memorize, and we often have them look up definitions, maybe translate it into their native language, but they often don't make connections between different words and concepts. So if they're able to see the words and see how they're used in correlation with one another, then they may have a higher chance of remembering such vocabulary words. Another thing you could have your students do is sketch notes. Now, Mr. Aikenhead and Mr. Riddick are 2 teachers that I would say are high-tech users, but in their classroom they've actually reverted back to pen and paper and have students take notes in this manner so that they can add images and draw arrows and make connections while they're going through their course content. They've both found that students are remembering a lot more of the content when they're able to do this sort of sketch note approach to absorbing the information. An activity one of my professors in university did has really resonated with me. It's this keyword activity, where after a whole week of readings and lessons and all this content, he says, pick one word. Pick one word, and off that one word, add some ideas through a mind map that support the main concepts or quotations or images related to that word that's your big takeaway for the week. So what happened by the end of the course doing this each week is I had 10 or so words that I could then break down and make a larger mind map connecting these smaller mind maps to one another and really understanding the course content instead of just regurgitating facts and information. So Ms. Cowan's been using mind mapping to map out the learning goals of her courses this term. So she'll start with the key ideas or the learning goals for the unit, and then alongside the students, they can brainstorm, well, what's connected to these ideas and how are these sub-ideas sort of connected to each other, and then it's a more visual way of looking at the learning goals of the unit. There's also a great activity as a sort of study guide at the end of a unit to say, well, create a mind map of everything we learned and connect all of the bits and pieces together so that we can see these enduring understandings of the course content and how it all makes sense as a big picture. In Mr. Connor's Earth and Science course, he wanted students to understand that all the units they went through are not separate ideas, and that in the world, everything's interconnected and everything works sort of together with one another. So for his culminating activity, he had students create a large mind map of all the concepts learned in the course, and then they needed to make connections between the ideas and add this is sort of what their knowledge was at the end of the course, and that's what he assessed. Now this student was very visual, but other students were more text-based, and they connected lines and explained why these ideas were connected. So these are some ideas of how you can use mind maps in the classroom. Mind mapping often used for brainstorming, but this is really like draft one of mind maps. It's important that after creating a first mind map, to then categorize the ideas into different categories. Because again, what we're trying to do is take new ideas and file them away into our knowledge sets, so our long-term memory. So any way that we can connect it to our prior knowledge, there's a better chance that we're going to remember new ideas. How about the software? I've demoed probably about 25 different mind mapping softwares, and what I've done is created a person chart really of the different softwares based on their functionality, what you have to do to log in, whether they're collaborative or not, if they're printable or not, and for middle school teachers I also included the age restriction if there is one. So you could print this document off for students or just use it for your own reference when choosing a mind mapping software to use in your classroom. And don't forget, if you have any questions, I have used all of these, so you can contact me and ask for my recommendations as well if you'd like. Copies of this comparison chart can be found in your Google Drive or at the link at the bottom of this page. So that's it on mind mapping today. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask me. Anyone who attended the workshop earned 50 points for the Delia Tech Challenge, and I'll be back 2 Wednesdays after the break for the next Lunch and Learn, Informal Teacher PD. Thanks!